Greetings. Welcome back to the continuing lecture in business math. This is Dr. Jeff Hong, and we are continuing with the depreciation today. Now, if you remember, in our last lecture, I left you off with the food for thought. The question was, why do the businesses prefer the write-off of the expenses in the first year rather than spreading it over multiple years? I mean, after all, $50,000 is still $50,000, whether it is written off in the first year or spread over the 5 years, right? But there is, I told you, it's not the same thing. That's why businesses want to prefer to depreciate in the first year, if possible, but it is not possible. That's why they came up with accelerated depreciation methods if they prefer to accelerate the depreciation, right, instead of just straight line depreciation. So then the question, once again, my food for thought was, what is the logical reasoning behind it? They are not the same. If they are not the same, $50,000 in year one or $50,000 spread over 5 years, they are not the same thing. And why aren't they the same thing, right? That was the question, right? Now think about it then. We're gonna, of course, this, as we do the accelerated depreciation, this is going to be answered automatically. So we'll first start with the actual depreciation example. But to get you set up, we got to start from the depreciation basics. In other words, starting with the terminology, some terminology of, so first, cost, when we say cost, we're talking about the cost of the capital asset, capital equipment, right? It's the purchase cost, of course, and the purchase cost is automatically the book value at time zero, right? If your company bought a $50,000 car, $50,000 is the purchase cost, right? So you write it off. You're going to be writing it off for 5 years, but in year one, at time zero, right? At time zero. Of course, the companies do not make the purchase necessarily on January 1st, right? But let's assume. We'll look into the. We'll first assume that all the assets are purchased at the beginning of the year one, and then later on we'll relax the assumption and allow for the purchases made at different points in time during the year. Okay, but at this point, for now, we'll assume the asset was purchased at the beginning of the year one, so that's time zero, right? So that's book value at time zero, because you're recording that cost in the book. Now, so the opposite concept of purchase cost is the salvage value. Salvage value is the book value of this capital asset at the end of the service life. So at the end, for this company car, at the end of 5 years, the service life, predesignated service life by the tax code, 5 years, right? At the end of year 5, the the book value of this car must be exactly either zero or scrap metal value, which is called salvage value, right? Now think about it. That means uh, the, the the car has been fully depreciated, right? Of course, in reality, once again, depreciation is an artificial. It follows an artificial schedule, right? It's an artificial concept in the first place. It doesn't really mean the. I've been telling you this over and over. It doesn't really mean the actual depreciation reflecting the actual value, market value, but this is a book value, so it must be zero or scrap metal at the end. Now, so the depreciation base, in other words, the amount or the value that you depreciate is actually the difference between the cost and the salvage value. So in our example, if the salvage value is zero, then you are depreciating the entire full $50,000. But if the scrap metal value is $500, then the depreciation base is only $49,500, right? Okay, and then life or service life is designated in years or maximum production unit or the maximum output level. So think about it. Usually in case of car, the service life is, designated in years, like 5 years. But not all the assets, all the cars just expire in 5 years. I mean, if you haven't used a car at all, right? Of course, if you haven't used a car at all, you can get a real good resale value, right? Even in the market, even after 5 years. But that is not what the book value is, supposed to reflect. And I told you it's totally artificial. Now, but think about it. You cannot simply determine the service life of the car if the car hasn't been used at all. But in general, vehicles, automobiles are generally designated. The service life is designated in a number of years. Something like, but think about it. Something like light bulbs. It's usually how many hours, right? How many hours it has been in service, or if it is a production equipment, the service life is determined in the production level or the output total number, the quantity of output, the amount of output it has produced. So if the machine has been used to produce, 10 million units or 100 million units, then that's the service life. 100 million units, then you consider it fully depreciated. So usually, then the depreciation rate is, defined as 1 over service life. Think about it. If that means, for our car example, the depreciation rate per year, because the service life is defined in years, right? Per each year, one fifth or 20% is depreciated, right? So that's the depreciation rate. If it's a machinery and equipment and its production service life is in the units produced, then if 10 million units is the service life for each unit, then it's 1 over 10 million, right? For each unit, that's the depreciation rate. So basically annual depreciation or depreciation expense, what they call annual depreciation or depreciation expense, because not all depreciation is in a number of years. Not all service life is a number of years, right? So it's basically, depreciation base divided by service life, right? Or um, simply depreciation base times depreciation rate. Yes, dividing by something is same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal of that. So, and then accumulated depreciation, of course, year one, year two, year three will accumulate. It's also called cumulative depreciation or accumulated depreciation. Doesn't matter. Cumulative, it means the same thing, right? Cumulative, accumulated. It's sum of all the annual depreciation, right? Sum of all the annual depreciation up to a certain point. For example, the service life of this car is 5 years, so you don't reach the end of the service life until the end of year five. But at the end of year three, uh, the cumulative depreciation is the depreciation, sum of the depreciation for the first 3 years. So there will have to be, if it is fully depreciated without any salvage value, then each year it's 10,000. So at the end of year three, cumulative depreciation will be 30K. Now, book value, we understand what book value is. At the end of, at the beginning, it's book value 0 at time 0. At the end of year one, book value at time 1. At the end of year 2, book value at uh, uh, time 2. But how do we, how else can we define it? Book value is the remaining book value, right, after depreciation, right? So it is the cost minus cumulative depreciation, accumulated depreciation until that point, right? So yeah, then we can also redefine accumulated depreciation as cost minus book value. And then cost can be defined as accumulated depreciation plus book value. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the Excel file and let's take a look at the example. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the Excel. So let's see. All right, so everyone can see this. Okay, so here, this is an example of a very simple example, and I'm showing you there are two ways we can do that. I can use this. I can use this format, or I can use this format. Right? I mean, this is more like horizontal. This is more like vertical. But all those variables we have defined in the PowerPoint, right? Those are the variables that we need to build our model. First, cost and the salvage value, depreciation base, life, and depreciation. So for this example, let's see, first of all, these are basically a given number. I mean, this has to be given, right? Initial input. These are initial inputs, they have to be given. Otherwise, those are initial inputs, right? So here, if the salvage value is 500, right? Then that's the book value at time 0 or purchase cost, right? Depreciation base is the difference between the two. So I'm going to simply do this minus this. Okay. Service life is 4 years, right? that means the depreciation rate will be 1/4 or 25% per year. Now, depreciation, that means this annual depreciation or depreciation expense. You should be flexible with the terminology. Annual depreciation or depreciation expense is the same thing. So I can call it like, okay. So then what should it be? Depreciation base is the difference, depreciation base, annual depreciation is that divided by life will be $2,000, right? So I can do it this way, or I can do it this way. And so you might wonder, what's the difference? What's the difference here? I mean, what's the difference? I mean, you can see the difference between the vertical table and horizontal model. What's the difference between these two horizontal models? You probably wonder, don't they mean the same thing? Don't they have the same? Yeah, but what I did here was, look, I simply, pointed to this, which is, right? The depreciation base divided by service life. And then here, yeah, basically, it's the same thing, right? So now let's go to the next example. I don't know why I put all these highlights there, but so here, our example here is, I'll make it depreciation expense, service life, just life, but I don't like to be too, verbose, right? So you know what? I want you to clear out everything, which is not a, so example, right? Okay. First example, it's not a difficult thing. What's the depreciation base? Of course, difference between the two, right? Service life is 5 years, so annual depreciation is depreciation base divided by 5. So it's easy. It's not a difficult thing at all. Now, next example. Cost is 10,000. Cost of the asset is 10,000. Salvage value 1,000. 1,000 salvage value is, I guess, too high. Let's make it 200. Why? Because scrap metal value isn't that high, and the service life is 3 years. Whatever, it's got a very short service life. Whatever. So this is depreciation expense, right? Or annual depreciation amount. And this is depreciation rate. We can, so let me move this around. Actually, yeah, this looks better. You see what the reason why I did that? What is the rate? Rate is the percentage, the depreciation rate per year, right? In this case, so which is simply 1/3, right? which will give you 33%, 33.33%. Depreciation expense, annual, right? Depreciation expense is simply the depreciation base, right? This minus this divided by service life, or it's the same thing as multiplying it by depreciation rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first find the depreciation base, okay, and then simply multiply it by this depreciation rate, okay? All right, and then see the difference you see between this model and this model is in this model, I had a separate column called depreciation base. But the depreciation base, you can have the separate column, but it is redundant, isn't it right? It's really not really uh, crucial, right? It's not really essential in the model because as long as you have these two, you can simply subtract salvage value from cost, right? Uh, I'll just call it sell value. Maybe SV later. I want to make it, as succinct and terse as possible, right? No, uh, this is not an English composition class. You don't have to write it out. No speech class. You don't have to spell it out. Uh, the more succinct, the more concise and succinct and terse it is, the better it is. Now, so then next thing we want to do is build uh, the depreciation schedule. Depreciation schedule is the schedule that shows how much, uh, how much is depreciated each year and uh, what's the accumulated depreciation each year and what's the book value each year. So I simply, it's an easy table. I simply built it like this. And then every year, depreciation expense is always the same, isn't that right? So I'm going to just drag it down, copy and right? So to uh, to make it not change as you go down the rows, right? You need to lock it. So you know what to do. Hit F4 and it locks into that cell, and then you just drag it down. Okay, I don't like that. I'll do that later. And the cumulative depreciation in year one is just itself, right? In year two is the sum of these two. I mean, you can do it in, this order or the other one. That's the same thing. And then you can drag it down. Now, book value is what? Cost minus, right? Accumulated depreciation. And our cost is there, minus accumulated depreciation. And you're going to drag it down, right? When you drag it down, this shouldn't change. B13, if it changes, then next, it's going to point to something, totally, it's just going to point to the blank, right? We don't want that to happen. So what do? You hit F4, right? And then you drag it down. And then how do you know if your depreciation schedule is correctly done or not? Always at the end of the depreciation schedule, the book value at the end, right, must be exactly the salvage value, right? That's the idea. I mean, if there is no salvage value, book value at the end should be 0, right? Suppose we change this to 0, it will be exactly 0, right? So this is the way you can check if the depreciation is done correctly. Okay, and if it is not, and you might wonder, isn't it always bound to happen? Isn't it always supposed to be that way? Uh, yes, it should be always, but sometimes when you uh, when the depreciation is not for the full entire year, right? Uh, for exa- for example, I told you we are assuming that this capital asset was purchased at the beginning of time 0. We start from like January 1st of the first year. But that's a hypothetical assumption. I mean, to make it uh, simple, but in reality, the asset can be. What if the asset was purchased in May, on something like May 12th, right? Uh, in the first year, right? You didn't own it for the entire year, for the full year. Uh, so you own the asset only for the partial year. So uh, what do? You need to make the partial year adjustment. Um, so sometimes you don't end up neatly with the salvage value. Uh, but then what do you need to do? You will need to make you will need to make adjustments so the book value at the end uh, will always end up neatly in the salvage value or with 0, right? Otherwise, it's sloppy, right? I mean, it's not like you committed a crime of uh, uh, life or death, but it's just not if it is not neat, right? Uh, it's not professional, and professionally you lose points, right? If it is sloppy, you lose points, right? Um, Obviously, you will lose credibility to your client if your work is sloppy. I mean, if you're a professional, right? So, uh, but and also I've been telling you this book, the textbook we are using, is uh, doing it very sloppily. I also explained it with the inventory valuation example, and I told you to be alert and focused and not follow exactly only the method taught by me, and not to follow the method done in the book because they there is so much sloppiness in the way they did it, and they don't even realize that they are doing it. I mean, although they use two-column methods, and then they are completely defeating their own two-column purpose, right? And they don't realize that, right? And that kind of sloppiness uh, definitely is devastating if you're operating as a, professional, right? And if the uh, uh, clients are sensible enough to notice the sloppiness, then you will never get their job again, right? You just have to keep your fingers crossed, and the client is dumb enough not to notice that sloppiness, right? But anyway, so it is really it's very important, right? Okay, something. What's going on with my mouse? Okay, it looks like what is going on? Looks like I'll have to close it and open again, I believe. Let me stop sharing that for now. Back to the so that Excel file was acting up. So let me put you on to PowerPoint again, and let me fix my Excel. Something is causing. All right. Okay, let me open that again. I didn't even save the file. Okay, what? So, all right. All right. So I'm back. The Excel I recovered Excel file. So let me go back. Oops, no, not that one. Share application. Now this one is acting up. Share application screen. Oh, stop sharing. All right. All righty. So let me just finish up the housekeeping. Okay. So this is also this is also part of the training. You know, keeping your keeping your model neat, right? I mean, something like this, right? Borderline. There should, you know, borderline is missing in this cell, and that makes that definitely, you know, it's not reflecting positively on you, don't you think? It's not because it's a sloppiness, right? It's not neat. So it's also the part of the training when you build a model, make it look neat and professional. Okay. Now, so the next example, let's move on to the next example. So let me delete all the, and this is easy, right? We all understand what is, what is being asked for. So this is a 4-year model, right? 4-year asset with 4-year life. I'll just call it. So it is better to, right, have it like this. Once again, I'll do the, I'll take care of the housekeeping to later. I'll save it for later. Now, and if possible, I would like to put the labels. I mean, I prefer to put center align the labels and give it underscore, right? Now, so whatever this asset is, it's the initial cost, purchase cost was 14,000, salvage value 2,000. That's too high. Let me make it something like because scrap metal, I don't think it's gonna scrap metal value at best would not be more than 250, right? Actually, think about it. If you if you have to send your car to the junkyard, I mean, after a long, 50 years, the car is 50 years old, and if it is a 50-year-old car, you may renovate it and probably turn it into a classic car, but it costs money. So let's say you're saying goodbye, so send the car to the junkyard. Even sending the car to the junkyard costs you money, right? So it's not like, but it's not like you can get a scrap metal value sell on it. But let's say for the businesses, yeah, you get salvage value, right? So then the service life is 4 years. So depreciation rate is always 1 over the service life. There you go, 5%. And the depreciation base is the cost minus salvage value, right? That's always the same thing, right? And times the depreciation rate, right? If you want to do that, then divide it by this. But think about it. This process is like 1 divided by this, right? Because it's already 1 over 4. And that's the annual depreciation amount, right? I'm going to put a large outside border. To make it consistent, right? And then here, this is easy, right? I'm sure you got the hang of it already. So depreciation each year is the same thing. So I'm going to lock it by hitting F4. and we drag it down. I don't want the border lines, so and then I'm going to take care of that later. Accumulated depreciation is basically in the first year it's just the self, right? But in this from the second year it's this plus this, right? And you drag it down. Book value is at the end of year one. It's always the purchase cost, book value at time zero minus accumulated or cumulative depreciation. And then you drag it down, and you have to check if the last year's book value at the end of last year is exactly the salvage value. There you go. Oops. Oh, I forgot to. You got to lock this, right? Hit F4, lock that, and then you drag it down. And voila, exactly salvage value, right? So your depreciation is your depreciation schedule is correct, right? You built it well. Let me do some housekeeping once again. Yeah, don't forget to make it neat, right? Your work reflects you. You have to remember, your work reflects you, right? It's reflective of your character, your intelligence. It's reflective of your personality, reflective of strength and flaws in your individual character, right? Like if you're a perfectionist, or if you're neat or sloppy, or all these things are reflected in your work. I mean, yeah. Um, I mean, it can be, different from, the model can be different from this, but, like the details, minor, details, you can look at it, and if it is aesthetically, at least, something is missing, right? From aesthetic point of view, or even from functional point of view, right? Uh, that's not neat, right? Something tells uh, uh, it's not the neatest form, right? Then that's sloppy, right? So that's the reason you got to give your best shot. You got to give everything you got to your work to make it look the best it can, because eventually that's your portfolio you will need to sell to your client, right? Portfolio of your sample work you will need to sell to your client, and then it needs to look at its best, right? Now, our next example, which is, now you should, I want to make this, and it keeps, now it, I want to have a longer example. So let's go to this file. I mean, I believe I have a longer example somewhere here. That's fine. I don't have longer example, partial year example. Let's see if there's also, do I have, okay, this file is missing some examples, so I'm gonna have to it's missing partial year example. So I'm going to get the partial year example. But anyway, this shows you why it is called straight line depreciation, because look at the book value. Book value is dropping in straight line, right? Also, if you look at the, this is the cumulative depreciation. Of course, year after year, the cumulative depreciation is bound to increase, and it is increasing in a straight line. Book value is dropping in straight line. Cumulative depreciation is increasing in straight line. That's why it's called straight line depreciation. So here, let's do our next example. Okay, so this one, did we do that one? Now, I just want to extend. Okay, I want to make it. What if it is like 8-year? You cannot do it like this, because if it is an 8-year, we will need to, let me do this. Let me do the whole thing all over again. So we'll need to insert, right? We'll need to insert rows, 2, 3, 4, 5 more, and then 3. So then, okay. Again, this should be, this better be, rate better be here. So depreciation expense, or annual depreciation is fine, but I'll make it come in the middle. Okay. I don't, probably not the underscore. Now, so this is a very cheap. So let me at least something like this. 250 salvage value. I mean, 8-year asset. Maybe make it. Yeah, if it is an 8-year asset, about $150,000 seem more like it. Now, depreciation rate, we know it's 1/8. Okay, then the depreciation expense is the depreciation base, and then times, you can divide it by 8 or just simply times. Yes, but it's not dollars. Why is it in dollars? But let me change that to a percentage. There should be 2 decimal places, okay? And this is supposed to be dollars, right? Yes, because I switched. Cost and salvage value, that's too obvious. So let me make it like, change that to 450, okay? Now, so the and salvage. I don't like to spell it out. Salvage value. So then the depreciation expense, we already know what to do. Do that. and hit lock it by, hit F4 and lock it. And then you drag it down. Accumulated depreciation, cumulative depreciation. In year 1 is just itself. From year 2 is the sum of this and this. And then you drag it down. Again, drag it down. Book value at the end of year 1. Book value is always purchase cost minus cumulative depreciation. But you got to lock the purchase cost. And then if you drag it down, what did I tell you? This has to be, does the book value at the end of the service life must be exactly the salvage value, right? And confirmed, right? All right. So what's left is the housekeeping. Yeah. You might wonder, don't you put the line there, a thick border? Yeah. Or even if you don't put the border line there, since this is highlighted, it makes a natural border. Anyway, so good. Up to this point, we're fine. But our next question is, what if let's think about it. What if this asset was not purchased? So we need to do the partial year example. Okay. We have a partial year example here. So let me copy this. It's not a big deal. Oh, I should have copied like, I should have copied like this. And let me use this. I will need, okay, let me put it here for now. And okay, let me bring it down here. Okay, so what is partial year like? So you can tell, right? You can tell from this something is slightly different. Okay, I wonder why there's no ear there, but it's not a big deal. Okay, move it. Let me just copy. That's fine. I'll just. So look, this asset has the salvage purchase cost of 14,000, salvage value of 2,000. That's too much. Let's make it like 200. And then service life is 4 years. And then, every year is 25%, right? Depreciation rate is 25%, and depreciation expense is, and, uh, the depreciation base times 25%. So it should be, or divided by 4, right? So this becomes redundant. But, let's do the same thing. I see 70. So then this has to be the annual depreciation amount. But in year one, it's not the same amount. But if you, but think about it. What I did was here, okay? What I did was, I could build a model slightly more, sophisticated model, right? Slightly, but here, what does that mean? A fourth of a year. Oh, the asset was owned only for 3/4 of a year in the first year. That means the asset was purchased on April 1st, right? At least in April, right? Because that's 3/4 of a year, 3/4 of a year, right? First quarter is gone, and then they purchased. Um, so we just made an adjustment to that, right? The fact that it was, purchased on uh, in April, right? So we made an adjustment in year one. Okay, so that makes sense. And then the rest of them are, normal, but, in the last year, suddenly it's different. Why? What happened is you are you are making that adjustment for, right? I did it in a very crude way. Uh, but what was missing in year one is compensated in year four, right? So this makes, like, the last year 1/4 longer than 1 year. Of course, physically it cannot be possible. 1 year cannot be a 5/4, right? 1 year is a full quarter, 4/4. But then why do we do that? We do this to end up exactly in the salvage value. If we don't do this, suppose it wasn't like this, right? Then you don't end up with a salvage value. If it was like that, you don't end up. So then it's not fully depreciated, right? This is to prevent that. As I told you, if it doesn't end up in the salvage value or predetermined, zero or predetermined salvage value, then it's sloppy. It's simply sloppy, right? So that's why we make the adjustment here. Of course, I have to, let me do this. Okay. Asset first. April. Okay. If the asset was purchased in April, right? You'll have to make, so I can make it more sophisticated. In other words, in year one, I can put a like, um, I can put a like a T0, T1, things like that, and then, make adjustment by that. Uh, uh, but, for now, let's do this. So T0, I can do, but then that makes the model a little. Uh, okay, so right, we can do this, and then I can make it reflect that. One minus this 365. We don't use ordinary, or we don't make this. We don't make distinction between ordinary or exact, ordinary and exact interest here, because it's not about the simple interest. 1 year is 365, so days. So this will give you F75 minus E75 will give you number of days. So to turn it into years, you have to divide it by 365. Or I can even let's do uh, just 365. Put 365 there, and we'll be simply. I'm gonna do and what's E71? E71 is that. Oh, actually, in this case, what I need to do is not that, but I'll be added back because it has to be 3/4 of a year. Okay, then the rest of it is the same. The reason I didn't want to do it this way is then the table becomes, I mean, there must be a way. There can be a way I can, make it neater. For example, the table is, extended like this. So that's why I didn't want to do it like that. Or I could have done differently. But the point is, uh, uh, whatever you do, you will need to make adjustment for the right, the partial yield factor. And here we'll need to make the adjustment also, like 1 plus, okay, and then that one. This is what. Uh, Okay. Now you see, this will give you, this is, 3/4. So 1 minus this will be, right, um, 1/4, right, quarter over year, right? And then, so in the last year, you have to have full year depreciation for the last year. In other words, this will give you 3,450, and this will give you 1/4 of that. So you have additional quarter in the last year. And if you do that, you end up exactly in the salvage value, right? Makes sense? Um, so in the I'll think about how to uh, make this look neat. I mean, this doesn't have to be here looking like this. I mean, it can be a separate table. For example, I can make it look. I can make it like this, and a separate table, and put it as a separate table. Right? I can put it as a separate table somewhere. So, okay. And then finally, the housekeeping. Uh, okay, so that's the partial year straight line depreciation example. And make sure you have. I will need to clean this up later, right? But that's not. Uh, so or maybe I'll drag it down here. So, okay. Alrighty. So that's it for today, and I will see you guys in the next class. Okay. End of video.